Hey, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We are so glad to have with us back Doe Boyer, who many of you know, who is a staff person with the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, which you're about to learn a whole lot about. Breaking news for those who aren't aware, the Coalition is our newest faith partner organization, recommended by the Global Justice team and approved by the leadership team. So our special offering this month is going to the Coalition. So you're also learning about where your funding is going to be going this month, should you choose to give to the special offering this month. Doe recently graduated from United Theological Seminary. They have joined us. They led a book study this summer, So We and Our Children May Live, that some of you may have participated in, which is a book that is co-written by the co-founders of the Coalition, Sarah Augustine and Sherry Hostetler. And Doe has also joined us for a number of other things throughout the last couple of years for discussions about the effort to protect Oak Flat in Arizona in solidarity with the Apache stronghold. You joined us for the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage last year and helped to do song leading. What am I forgetting about? You joined us for an adult ed last Lent. So you are already a part of our family, Doe, and we're so glad to have you back with us. I've also handed around, there should be one for everybody, the UCC resolution. We'll refer to that in subsequently when we turn to the discussion. So, Doe, please take it away.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be back here with you all. Yeah, as Susie said, many of you already know me, but my name is Doe Boyer. I'm the organizing director with the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. I joined the coalition in 2022 as a volunteer. I read Sarah Augustine's first book, The Land Is Not Empty, right after doing a bunch of Line 3 resistance activism and learning that I really didn't understand these structures and what had really happened with the Line 3 pipeline ultimately being built. And so the coalition pointed these things out and also had a call for me as a person of faith to come in and do organizing work to dismantle these structures. I'm here, I live locally in Minneapolis, but the coalition is a bi-national organization. So we have organizers all across Turtle Island, the so-called US and Canada, and ultimately our concerns are global, not just specific to the US. And so this presentation, I revamped a little to make it very interactive. So this 101 to the Doctrine of Discovery is both trying to get us all on the same page about what the Doctrine of Discovery is, but also today, hopefully a little bit of practice as organizers talking about what this is, because it's sometimes feels like this very big abstract concept and we want to bring in all this historical stuff and then we maybe start to lose people. So we're going to kind of practice saying it in like the most succinct way today, and we'll get there, but I am going to give you a heads up that I'm going to give you a little practice putting it in your own words today. So first, we have the mic, we're recording, so we're going to kind of go around, but let's just see what's already in the room. When we say the Doctrine of Discovery, what is it? What are we talking about?
When over in England, the Pope, I believe the Pope, no, I'm not sure of my facts, but said that any land that the Christian people find that is occupied by indigenous people can be theirs for the taking.
Any other additions? I'll just keep passing the mic around.
It's a really lousy excuse for genocide.
I think part of the Doctrine of Discovery and I'll find out if I'm correct or not, is that if people may be indigenous, but if they were Christian, well, that was different. And then that maybe their land wasn't as free to just take.
I think, beside what people have said, I think what strikes me most about the doctrine of discovery is the total ignoring that people were on this land. It had already been discovered.
Kind of ditto what James said, but also in my mind, it's that some of us felt that indigenous people aren't human.
Well, there's a sense of privilege. Yeah, and nobody can doubt that privilege.
I would just say it's in the long line of patriarchy and ignorance on the part of white Europeans.
I just appreciate your intro that we're gonna be able to have a clear understanding of what it is. Cause I've certainly read through this description various times and then come away like, I don't quite know. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think people have said what I have said.
Okay. Any other?
What comes to mind to me is just self-righteous Christians.
I think the only thing I can think beyond this is the doctrine of discovery. More recently in 2008 was upheld by the Supreme Court that it was not necessary to return the land back to indigenous people.
Okay. Last comment, yeah.
I would like to know why the doctrine of discovery is not taught in grade school, middle school, senior high school, even colleges.
Yeah. I think we got a chance to go all the way around the room. So I'm gonna just reflect back some of the things that I heard. So we heard that the church played a role, and there was acknowledgement of like England or in Europe, right? That the church actually had a role in authorizing the conquest of indigenous lands globally. I heard someone also say that this paradigm is really dehumanizing, and that if you were Christian, the rules were different, right? So the racial hierarchy that was created was that if lands were already discovered by a Christian monarchy, those lands were off limits. But any lands around the world that didn't already have Christian colonization in motion were supposedly, fair game for economic and political exploitation, right? So I heard some of those things. I heard that some of this is still very relevant, right? That we've even, I think it was 2005 was when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg cited the doctrine of discovery in a decision, again, about returning, I forget all the details of it, but it was a land return case, the Oneida Nation. And yeah, so there's this sense of it being very historical, but I think the most important thing about the doctrine of discovery, especially as we try to communicate it to people and why they should care about it, is that this is still our current paradigm, right? This is still active laws and policies in especially our US structure, but in colonial governments around the world. So Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, right? Canada, these are laws and policies that continue to maintain that racial hierarchy and makes it possible to remove indigenous peoples from their lands still today. We especially see this play out with extractive corporations going after minerals. So the green transition, which we are often marketed as our solution to climate crisis is actually continuing to perpetuate this extraction, removal of indigenous peoples from their lands. So that's kind of my quick summation, but when we talk about this, this is our typical slide. So these are some of the talking points from the coalition. So we are talking about a legal and philosophical framework that dates back to the 15th century. I've also adopted from Sarah Augustine saying a whole body of law and policy, right? So we're not just talking about one law, this is many, many laws, right? And our legal system is based on precedent, so they build on each other through the different eras of removal and assimilation of indigenous peoples in this country. But what it actually did was it gave Christian governments moral and legal rights to invade indigenous lands. And it wasn't first really called the Doctrine of Discovery. That actually, does anyone know where that phrase comes from? This comes from Chief Justice Marshall's decision in 1823. So this is actually the first time where it gets introduced into our US law. So referencing the past Christian, doctrine and paradigm, and even in that decision, he talks about it as unjust, but he sort of is like, but this is the way it is in this country. So that phrase, Doctrine of Discovery, doesn't come from the papal bulls, it comes from the introduction into our laws and policies in the US. And so when we talk about the Doctrine of Discovery, we're talking about also patterns of oppression that continue to exist today. And it's this paradigm that's informed papal bulls, royal charters, US Supreme Court rulings, and continues to form this paradigm that legitimates extractive industry. So that's really important, right? Often when we talk about it, we're like, oh yeah, it's from the 15th century, and it feels really distant and removed from our reality today. But actually, this is ongoingly our reality. All peoples, all of us are impacted by these legal structures. So next slide. Have you seen this image before?
It was on the cover of our bulletin a couple weeks ago for a sermon I preached.
Let's do another go around. This time, my question is just going to be, what do you notice? What do you notice about this image?
She's very white.
Oh, we're gonna send a mic around just so everyone can hear. Yeah, why don't we?
That's what, I don't know who just said, did you just say that? I was gonna say the same
Can
thing.
you repeat it for
Such a white, angelic, justice-filled figure.
I guess I also see just the hierarchy of the people at the top. You see some animals too, like towards the back. Yeah.
Trains and wagon trains, people moving along, apparently going west, but.
Well, when I look at this and I see what I presume is an angel, sent from God. In other words, God is smiling over this whole idea.
She's enormous, compared to all of the people in wagons full.
I see an image that looks very peaceful moving across a space where there is nobody. I don't see any native indigenous people in this picture, are there?
Yeah.
Okay, those, so what's happening with them? Are they being kind of pushed in some way?
Yeah, that's kind of what I see, the movement and what's on this edge of the picture.
What I see is only the cinder bright up, and then the kind of like the little ones are sort of darkish.
So the light and dark motif, yeah.
Just that she's carrying something, I mean, she's carrying the doctrine, the book, or whatever, maybe it's the Bible, I don't know what it is, but
that it has legitimacy.
Striking to me how much land itself is sort of almost irrelevant in the image. It's kind of the background and not the focus at all.
With or without my glasses, I have trouble seeing the details.
The light and dark, the shadow, the light from the clouds, just where the light is, where the shadow is, and the concept of the religious overtones, the concept of the angel of the nation as this what looks to be all beauty, all peacefulness floating over.
I see the progress that's already being made as far as setting up homes and so forth, but then also the large amount of people that are still coming. You know,
What's fascinating for me, it's an advertisement for the telegraph company, and it's probably a phone book that she's holding under. You know, it's this combination of commercial or, you know, kind of business and prosperity, all of those gospels that we have that somehow deviate from gospel we should be acknowledging.
I see the heads of the native people being down, almost defeated, and the settlers that are coming up over on the bottom, middle, and other side have their heads up high. And the telegraph wire, the
Yeah.
technology that's being brought to the darkness.
Well, I can't really see it, so I have to make something up, sort of. I can't tell what it is very well, but the brown, it looks like the land, the growth, what had been growing there, either has been destroyed in parts of this, well, it's from here, like it's been destroyed, it's the brown. There's very little natural, there's a few trees that are left, but other than that, it's not there.
Well, moving to the left on the maps, which is west, so it's clearly moving west. I think I'm surprised that the big figure is so female. And kind of a patriarchal time again. So it's supposed to be, this is just all natural, this is all good. That was kind of.
Exactly.
They seemingly have had this epiphany. They're all moving in the same direction. I mean, everything from the trains, the animals, the indigenous folks, we're now going together in the right direction.
It is an invasion of all sorts, like people have said, but what they don't talk about is the non-peaceful aspect of the military, actually, who probably preceded all this. And started destroying people too, and then following up with destruction, military destruction. Do you see any military people in it?
Hard to say, these could be prospectors, but yeah.
Okay.
I guess what I don't see is a question mark after the word progress.
Mm-hmm.
It appears that the female gender has got a special place in God's creation.
When you come into our house, there's maybe like a 4-foot painting, it's Whistler's The White Girl. And it looks, the female looks a lot like that, except that she's standing with flowers dropped on the floor, waiting humbly for something. And this is the opposite of that. I mean, it's very, not only white, but huge. And it looks like it looks like wherever she's going is inevitable, that there's no, you can either get on board or you can, not.
I know you can't see, but the book is a school book. That's what it says on there. So it harkens back to what we learned about last week from Stephanie Purdue about forms of education.
I don't know if this is the right word for it, but it seems very sterile or pristine to me. It's like it's perfection and and what they did was really dirty and grimy. You know, and it just seems so, I guess pristine is the best word I can describe it. There's not an imperfection in it at all. What we're doing this in the name and justification of God.
Is there anything you wanted to add about what you see in this painting? No.
Yeah, so all really important noticings from the collective, right? You're right, it's an advertisement, right? So from 1872, we think about kind of the removals that were happening during that time, this emphasis on westward expansion, the bringing of the technology, question mark progress, right? At the time, all of this being construed as the better civilization, right? Because what are they, that light and dark motif is actually so important in this, right? You have this central figure, and this is actually supposed to be Columbia. So she's holding the school book and she's kind of representing Western schooling and ways of educating and things. But we can also read, the angelicness into her, like, is she holding the Bible, right? Like all of those things I think are also intentional. But it's the light and dark motif is telling us that this is good and we're, bringing this to the side that's cast in the darkness, right? So when we see this image, it's like we know this is the paradigm that we're steeped in this country, right? This is culturally we understand this to be true of attitudes still today in the United States. And if you click this slide, this is often so that says manifest destiny. Probably you heard that from, I don't know, past education before. But this image is often tied with that concept of manifest destiny. And when folks were remarking that this figure kind of seemed very angelic, right? And that she's being cast as if it's God's will that she's bringing this, right? All of that is really embedded in manifest destiny. So we can see that attitude, that particular US flavor as really coming out of the Doctrine of Discovery as well. So go to the next slide.
So Doug,
Oh, yeah.
would you say that the manifest destiny originated from the Doctrine of Discovery, but it specifically addresses what happened right here in America? Is that close to being accurate?
Yeah, I've heard my friend and co-organizer John Stays talk about it as like our US flavor of the Doctrine of Discovery.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have heard of manifest destiny or can recognize that a little easier. And if we've never heard about the Doctrine of Discovery, that's often a good entry point for folks is to bring up the concept of manifest destiny. But we are talking about a global problem, right? So manifest destiny is what we can recognize in the US, but this is because of our economic systems at this point, this is all around the world. So this image is kind of a finished product of an exercise that we sometimes do in the coalition. And for time, we won't do it, but I'll just explain what this is. So what we ask people to do is to look around their homes if we're doing this over Zoom and just identify 3 things in the room where you're sitting. So it could be batteries, it could be your phone, coffee, right? And then actually look at what minerals are in that thing, right? So with phones, there's probably lithium in the batteries and copper with some of the wiring and all kinds of things that I'm not remembering right now. But what we did is then we actually looked at, well, where does that actually come from? Which countries do these minerals come from? And so then we put them on a map. This is back in the days when there was a Jamboard. which doesn't exist anymore sadly, but so we put these little post-its, you know, lithium from Australia is connecting all the way to us in Minnesota. Oil and gas in Russia connects to us in Minnesota. Lead from China, right? Gold from Suriname, fluorite from Mexico, copper from Arizona, right? And what this activity is called is revealing relationships of extraction. Which is to say, we sometimes don't think that we are in relationship with Indigenous peoples, but actually we are. We are in relationship with Indigenous peoples through our extractive economic systems. And we just don't recognize that relationship as a relationship because it is based in extraction and exploitation and removal from lands and culture. All to say, we are deeply embedded with Indigenous peoples all across the globe. And while it is incredibly important to also focus on, you know, our context in the United States, we can't lose sight of this as a global problem and our embeddedness with Indigenous communities all around the world. So the next slide is going to be your chance to put it in your words, okay? So I'll read this definition aloud. I just screenshotted it from one of our manuals. But then I'm going to have you put it in your own words, kind of from everything that we've talked about so far. So this definition, or working definition, the doctrine of discovery is a system of laws and policies designed to remove Indigenous peoples from their lands. It originated from documents written by the Pope in the 15th century. In these papal bulls, the Pope gave authority to European Christian monarchies to invade and conquer pagan lands or lands that were not yet controlled by a Christian monarch. Discovery meant that the first monarch to stake claim to a land had the first right to claim title to it. The doctrine of discovery granted authority to European monarchs to kill, remove, displace, and control Indigenous tribes. This authority remains today. So then if you want to forward. So I'm going to have you pair up. So maybe first just find someone right next to you that you can be in a pair with. You can also opt out. So don't feel like you have to do this. This is just an invitation if you want to practice for your own organizing. So assuming you have a pair or are willing to find one, what we're going to do is, so if you look again, person one, you can look at this, but try also to put it in your own words. Imagine you're telling a new person for the first time what the doctrine of discovery is, right? Just try to put it in your own words. You don't have to get it right. It's just a practice, right? And then person two is going to listen, like with all of their creativity and intelligence, really listen to what this person is telling you so that you can actually reflect back what you hear. Okay, and this is really important because it will feel a little bit more like a dialogue, right? And it helps us kind of integrate these words together a little bit better to also reflect back what you hear. And then we're going to do it again, and you'll switch roles. So then it will be whoever was person one will be person two, and whoever was person two will be person one. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes total for this. To just practice in your own words, what is it the doctrine of discovery? How would you tell someone new about what this is and why they should care? All right, 10 minutes starts now. If anyone still needs a partner, you can maybe raise your hand, how to get matched. Yeah. And then on the last slide, yeah. Okay, great. This is good. Yeah. Totally. Yep.
And if we have, we could. There's no user number here. Yeah. It's been about 5 minutes. So if you haven't had a chance to switch. This would be a good time to switch roles. And practice describing it in your own words and the other person listen and reflect back.
Let's talk a little bit about what that looked like. Practicing, talking about the doctrine of discovery. And I think rather than send the mic around this time, I'll just invite if anyone wants to just reflect on that experience. I'll try to repeat what you say back into the mic for the folks who do that. So how was that practicing? Kathy, yeah.
Yeah,
Or we can send it around to it today.
I like the breakout because then, and before that, when people were sharing, because people here aren't really like mincing words, you know, they're just calling it what it is, so it's kind of getting at the broader truth. When we hear, you know, originally some of the history of it, it's more academic in a way, but the small group and what we're sharing earlier, it really gets at, you know, what is effect on people.
Yeah, good. Any other reflections of what that was like?
To Kathy's point, I think you opened up by saying, we're gonna take your land because we can. I mean, in his, you know, underline, this is what it's about. You have something we want. We'll justify it with Christianity and salvation and things. We're gonna give you this great thing. We're taking what you have.
James, anyone else?
One thing that both stood out to me in my partner here is the idea that that last sentence really stood out to me. This authority remains today. Because we're talking about what happened, you know, since first contact, but to realize that this BS is still going on is really shocking to me. It really stood out.
I'm glad it stood out. I think it should stand out, right? And this is probably of anything, as we talk to people, this is the thing we need to make sure we say. That this isn't historical, this is present day, this is ongoing, this authority remains today, right? Because that's why people they need to understand this, to understand why we should care and why it matters still today.
I was gonna say, I think too, what's here is really important, but also noticing like what's not there, like what we don't talk about is like. Just how this sets up this idea that humans own land, you know, and that, you know, that land is just a resource, it's not anything that has rights or, you know, animals like other, life forms, like it's just, again, really setting up this hierarchy and cementing it.
And within the Christian tradition, there's so much that actually aligns with an indigenous worldview, right? So it's not emphasizing and highlighting the theology that lifts that up, right?
Well, the one thing that came out of Penny's and my discussion is, you know, this happened right after the Civil War. And so we freed the slaves and enslaved the indigenous people. I mean, it's like they didn't count. I mean, we never even thought about them. I mean, it was not even within our realm of consciousness, you know, so.
I would say even still today, you know, if you see any statistics that are broken down by like racial categories, typically Native Americans are just completely excluded. So I think the erasure that you're talking about is also by design and very deeply embedded, and even, you know, is part of the foundation really of our country starts with that erasure.
Hi, I'm Mary Lou, sorry, I forgot my name.
Oh, okay.
I really didn't know a lot about this being new here. So it was helpful to me to hear this in their own words. But it also brings me, this is not just about the land, but I know where we moved from in Pennsylvania, there was a cemetery where all these Native children were buried who had been taken from their families to make them Christian. And, you know, make them fit in. Assimilate, thank you. And so there's that too. It wasn't just land. I mean, we felt it was our right to take their children. And that kind of stuff is still going on today in other countries for sure. Right now, it's going on here too. So it's scary.
Well, thank you for practicing this. You remember when I introduced this, I was saying that this is an important part of organizing, right? To be able to say what it is, communicate it succinctly to another person, and I would add and call them in to doing something about it, right? And so as we think about what does it actually mean to call people into some of this work the coalition does, I'll just highlight two of our campaigns with Indigenous partners that are really aiming for structural change. So you all are more familiar with Oak Flat and our partnership with the Apache Stronghold. Susie traveled down with me to Oak Flat last February and participated in a prayer run that was led by Apache Stronghold. But I'll just kind of again summarize for us that this is a group in Arizona of Western Apaches and their indigenous and non-indigenous allies that was created in response to the illegal land transfer of their sacred lands. Oak Flat is a place where ceremonies, coming of age ceremonies for Apache girls have happened for millennia. Like it is a sacred place because it holds all the memories of those ceremonies and like liberation of Apache people, right? And they transferred this land, the US government, Senators John McCain and Senator Flake, transferred this land in a defense bill in 2014, which is something that Congress has to pass at the end of every year. So they snuck it in, being like illegally transferred. Apache Stronghold formed to sue the US government over that. But they've been fighting to protect Oak Flat long before that, right? And really the way that they do this is very anchored in prayer and in ceremony and in calling in other people of faith to recognize that Oak Flat is really the battleground right now for religious freedom and religious rights in this country. Because what is being brought up in this case that has come before the Supreme Court, they have petitioned for rehearing again. But the argument in this case is about religious freedom in this country and who we actually mean that to be for, right? And so one of the actions that we worked really hard at in the coalition was getting congregations, national denominations, conferences, Episcopal dioceses to sign on to their case in amicus briefs. You might remember that Creekside was one of those congregations. So that was a hugely important action of solidarity because this case is all about religious freedom. And if you have Christians, right, we're acknowledging that in this country, it still is Christians that are the intended beneficiaries of power, right? So to have Christians align with Apache folks on these arguments for religious freedom, to have Christians say that the land is sacred too, is hugely significant, right? And the Supreme Court, I mean, they didn't decide to take it up, but there was only 2 dissenting opinions. It was Gorsuch and
Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas wrote a very strong opinion about why this is important and that like this is actually a crucial case. So there is a lot happening around Oak Flat. Right now, we're really calling folks into prayer. There's going to be a ceremony, a sunrise ceremony. So for an Apache girl who has agreed to have faith leaders come and bear witness. So they're organizing some national heads of like UCC, UU, there's an Episcopal bishop in our coalition who's attending. I think some of the sisters from Land Justice Futures might be there. So having a religious leader delegation bear witness to this ceremony, hoping also that there will be all these other echo prayer vigils so that the live stream that they give from Oak Flat can be shared and watched again. So I would encourage you to maybe consider finding that live stream, watching it together, discussing it. I think that's everyone out. Yeah, and just generally kind of paying attention right now to what's happening at Oak Flat because we're not entirely clear when the land could be transferred, but we're getting to that point where there's a few other cases that are waiting to be heard that could grant a continued injunction on the land transfer. But yeah, definitely encourage you all to pay attention and Wensler Nosey pictured here and has been doing some speaking tours around the country as well. So encourage you to just watch out for those things. And then the next campaign I also want to highlight, this is a newer campaign, an Indigenous partner. So these 2 women here are Shinnecock Nation members and they have created a kelp farming project. So Shinnecock Nation is on Long Island and their neighbors are the Hamptons. Probably heard. Yeah, so some of the wealthiest people in our country are the direct neighbors of this Indigenous nation, which have been pushed from larger land holdings onto kind of this thing that they call the neck. That's where their reservation is now, below sea level. Has a lot of flooding issues, mold problems. So they're trying to find economic options to remediate this issue across the reservation. So they've tried to create a travel lodge, like a gas station type thing, and been met with litigation by all these wealthy folks. They've also had electronic billboards that they get pulled into litigation by New York State over because they're unsightly. But meanwhile, they're forced to go these routes, these capitalistic routes, because they're sacred waters, Shinnecock Bay, where they do this kelp farming, where, you know, has been their economic livelihood for generations. is severely polluted by the solid waste runoff from these wealthy homes because there's no sewage treatment plant. Yeah. Yes, so this is another instance where we are being called in as people of faith. I mean, a little bit to judge and shame. I mean, this is like abhorrent, right? It's everything that we're talking about, but like amplified because of the obscene wealth that is there to contrast with this nation. And Shinnecock Nation, I guess among other indigenous communities, are considered like also kind of like a stronghold or like the holdouts, because they've been there for so long, right? Shinnecock Nation has been there resisting colonization, this extreme colonization, since the beginning of it on the East Coast. So they're really incredibly resilient people, and what they're organizing people of faith around is a land back campaign. So I think it's gonna be June of 2026, the US Open. It's gonna be at Shinnecock Golf Club, I think that's what they call it. In the Shinnecock Hills, which was that land that they had been pushed off of. And so their campaign is give us back Shinnecock Hills. And there's all these very interesting things happening where homes are being built on indigenous land that have no title. And they're finally getting fined for that. And it's kind of a possibility that there might be a revoking of that land because it has no title. So anyway, we sent a delegation to really learn about all this, to be in storytelling and learning from our Shinnecock partners, so that we can plan this campaign, right? So a lot of what we do in the coalition is send out our delegations to build those relationships, to gather information, and then we take the lead on how we're going to organize other Christians, other people of faith to join them in their efforts, right? So we add capacity to things that are already happening. The Shinnecock already have lots of amazing allies on Long Island, and the coalition is coming in specifically to call in other faith communities so that the whole country is paying attention to what's happening and can see the injustice of this. The other thing I just wanted to lift up as one other campaign that the coalition is working on. A couple of years ago, we created something called the Episcopal Indigenous Justice Roundtable. And much like the UCC denomination, the Episcopal denomination have passed resolutions, right, to repudiate the Doctrine of Discovery, or, they had passed resolutions on solidarity with Oak Flat, boarding school work, right? And so very top-down kind of things. And as we heard from Stephanie last week, the top-down things do not immediately lead to organizing. You also need to have a grassroots structure. Does not have to be clergy. It can be lay leaders plus some maybe ordained leaders. But you need to have a grassroots movement to sort of come with strategies to have those resolutions actually move forward. So that's what they've been doing with a focus on boarding school. Episcopal Church was actually, as they've learned in this process, very instrumental in designing the government policy around boarding schools. So there's a heavy implication in boarding school history with the Episcopal Church, and that's primarily why they're really focusing there. So some of the things that they did, very first thing, was at the Episcopal General Convention in, I think this was 2024. The coalition had a table, and we were just trying to talk to people about it and get more people signed up to join our roundtable. It's like a monthly call. At this point, there's representation from all these different dioceses around the country, and they have a connection point, right, where we maybe learn about each other's work, but we're aligned on a boarding school policy and strategy. And so over the past year, what they've also been doing is hosting these boarding school pilgrimages. So our executive director, Sarah Augustine, has led a bunch of those with our, Sarah's right here and Joe is right there. With Joe Hubbard, our Episcopal organizer. He's an Episcopal priest in North Dakota. And so they've brought people to pilgrimage sites to hear from survivors, elders about the impact of these things and also have, you know, conversations about, just the broader scope of Indigenous justice liberation, what it takes to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. So I say all this to plant some possible seeds. Cause if you were here for Stephanie Purdue's talk last week, there's a similar thing happening in the UCC, right? Where there's the resolution, and this resolution is about repudiating the doctrine of discovery. But if you think about the boarding school resolution, you have something from the top down. But what she was saying is, well, there hasn't really been a grassroots effort to like meet that resolution. And I think she gave some really good ideas with like fundraising, just even starting to convene a team of supporters. And so that's what has been done in the Episcopal Church, and we've seen some really good momentum build across the denomination. So some of those ideas like tabling at a convention or thinking about ways to really engage people's hearts and minds, like these are really transformative experiences from what I've heard from participants. So those kinds of things that really commit people long-term to this work from a place of love while also reckoning with our history. Again, just planting some seeds and ideas for you all as you think about that work within the UCC. So then this, I just wanted to lift up because we think about, well, how does change really happen, right? You know, we're talking about dismantling the doctrine of discovery, and as we know, that's many laws, many policies beyond any of our lifetimes, right? And so we, I think, faithfully in the coalition hold to this model for change where all of our work is both cultural change, and this is maybe where we're educating folks, we're lamenting together this history, we're feeling our grief over it, we're allowing our hearts and minds to be transformed, right? So any of the films that we see and the discussions that we have all help with this cultural change. But hopefully we don't just stop there, right? We don't just stop with our own transformation around these things. We actually feel moved into the structural change organizing, right? Aligning with Indigenous partners who have a clear ask for us of people of faith, whose campaigns are, you know, right, kind of finding the pressure points of the structures, whether that's because they have court cases or they have a legislative policy target, right? But aligning with them and working alongside them towards changing laws and policies, towards returning land to Indigenous peoples, towards continually lifting up, right, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples so that it can be upheld throughout the world. That's our work in the coalition, and that's what we invite you into as one of our faith partners. And so just as a way of ending, sounds like you've seen this image before. But
We didn't coordinate this, but it's perfect.
yeah, it's just these images are really helpful. So I'm gonna invite you to just take a moment with this image, and I think timing wise, are we doing okay?
It's 10:43. We have a couple minutes.
Okay, we're not gonna send the mic around because that will be too long, but tell me what you noticed about this image. And I'll repeat back to the recording.
Justice.
Notice justice.
Reclaiming.
Reclaiming.
The animals are moving along.
And animals are moving along.
The buffalo are returning.
The buffalo are returning.
Yeah, the wild thing.
The wild ones.
sort of, or like, we're gonna decide what kind of animals.
Mhm. The wild animals are returning and contrasting that to the other image of more domesticated.
It's dark down the east, like damaged.
Yeah, there's the darkness is representing the ecological devastation and damage from the things that we call progress in the other image, right? Yeah, so there's a total reversal of that light and dark motif in this image, right?
And what is she carrying?
It's the opposite. So instead of bringing the telephone lines, she is picking it up as she goes. So she's reclaiming her, yeah, so she's picking up the lines.
Looks like a scorched earth. That's the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, so this scorched earth over here.
Solution.
Yeah.
Pollution.
Pollution, yeah, yep, all this pollution from the factories and the fire that's that scorched earth.
And the cultivated land is.
Mhm.
They're going, again, it's just the wild, that.
And the thing I love most about this image as a response to the other one is that, you know, in the first image, you had this figure coming against like indigenous people, so there was that like, I don't know, just image of like a battle or something. And in this one, all the people are on the same side, and what we're coming for is industry and corporations and that pollution, right? So it's not about humans, it's the systems and this ecological damage that will be irreversible if we don't do something. But it also gives us a sense of like life can return, right? If we align with indigenous ways of being in the world, right? And that we have things within the Christian tradition that also agree with those indigenous worldviews as well. So I offer this as a hopeful end to our talk for now. And thank you so much for being here this morning, for participating.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you all and hope to see you soon.
A quick reminder, folks, that this is all being offered as part of our rollout of our proposed new land acknowledgement, and the land acknowledgement has another half to it, the covenant, which is the commitments that we want to make, recognizing some of these histories. How could we want to commit to healing the land, the water, and all peoples who share this land? Minnesota, Makoche, but writ large too, in Turtle Island and the whole world. So the seeds that Doe is planting, think about harvesting those seeds and crafting personal commitments for yourself, but also proposing some for the congregation about how we can step into this work of healing and share them with us. There's hard copies of our feedback form at the welcome desk or in the office, or there's the online form that you can find via our email newsletter, or just ask me, send me a note. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Doe, so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.